The motion, Secretary. The question is the motion be agreed to. The Honourable the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the device of the censure motion has been used more by this Leader of the Opposition in this session of Parliament than in the last decade. In this chamber, it has been abused as a standing order. It now has no status in terms of the priority of an issue or prioritising issues, or in fact requiring the government to answer a case that's now been used simply like a matter of public importance. Either we see censure motions moved during question time or immediately after question time. They are moved willy-nilly, whatever takes the Leader of the Opposition's fancy. And not only that, they are simply a device then to bring forth the vitriol like that I'm blatantly dishonest. It's indicative of the type of person this man is. All of this highly personal invective, which the Leader of the Opposition specialises in, which he specialises in, Mr. Speaker, and what is the opening case? That the budget numbers are not Treasury numbers, he says. And I quoted to him the reference at page medium-term forecasting framework, all the appropriate references, yet asked himself about his own forecast. Dr Hewson also admitted yesterday the forecast 2 million jobs the Coalition trumpeted when it launched its fight back in November was only a judgment. Only a judgment. Only a judgment. I mean, what a hypocrite. What a hypocrite. It's a censure motion, Mr. Speaker. No, it's a censure motion. It's a censure motion. What a hypocrite. I don't need advice to the Leader of the Opposition. What a craven hypocrite.
No, said that on the day of the launch of that package, so there would be no misrepresentation.
Words that are normally unparliamentary are not allowed during a censure motion either, and I suggest the Prime Minister—
Dishonest was used a few minutes ago.
Yes, and that's within the scope.
Mr. Speaker, well, the hypocrisy of this statement—
He's cavilling with your ruling. He has not.
No, he's not cavilling with you.
No, quite clearly he is cavilling. He has not withdrawn.
No.
And he repeated it over and over again.
The member for Dundas has no point of order. The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker.
The member for Parkes.
Days ago, as the second Speaker in the MPI, I was asked by you to withdraw or to sit down. The same standard should apply to the Prime Minister.
The Honourable Prime Minister. The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker. So, in other words, Mr. Speaker, here we have the Leader of the Opposition taking the government on the basis of its forecasts.
Point of order, Mr. Deputy.
Point of order.
This is your last.
Point of order.
My point of order was, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The order. The member for Kooyong. I warn the member for Kooyong. The member for Parkes has a point of order.
My point of order clearly was I was not allowed to go on until I had withdrawn for using the same word that the Prime Minister has just used.
The Prime Minister
should apply to the Prime Minister, and he should be made withdraw
the Prime Minister
before
has
he
the
allows
call.
to go on. Otherwise, there are two standards: one applied to this side of the chamber and one to that side of the chamber.
The Prime Minister has the call. The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the opposition moves a censure, and then when the government replies, we have the succession of pointless, frivolous points of order. Frivolous points of order. Now, Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is that the principal forecast upon which the Leader of the Opposition relies, and which he's pamphleted the whole nation by putting 5 or 6 million of these porkies into every letterbox in the country, 2 million more jobs. He admits that it was only a judgment, and he's got the hide to query the official forecast coming from the Treasury, the Prime Minister and Cabinet, the Reserve Bank, the Department of Finance, and my office. Yes, Dr. Rick Symes, formerly the Treasury's chief econometrician, and the Treasurer's office. After all, the statement was a statement by the Prime Minister, compiled in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, not in the Treasury. It's not a budget, doesn't purport to be a budget, and it explained adequately, more than adequately, the forecasting framework. But this is dragged into disrepute by the Leader of the Opposition and Senator Walsh, and shame on him for doing it. Shame on him for doing it. Now, Mr. Speaker, he went on to say that is after this enormous fabrication, 2 million more jobs created by abolishing 7 unfair taxes, that is, taxes being replaced by the GST, which he said was not modelled, repeat, not modelled. It's then that he then relies upon the 2 million, which are 2 million jobs, which, as he says, in his own words, was only a judgment, and then leaflets the whole country, and then accuses me of dishonesty. Dishonesty! I mean, it's just massive dishonesty on your part to be doing this sort of thing. Massive dishonesty on your part to be doing this sort of thing. And then he goes on to talk about how Senator Walsh has argued that how we run fiscal policy and a flat tax. Look, understand this about Senator Walsh. Senator Walsh believes in 60% marginal tax rates. I mean, he opposed me when I cut the rates to 49% in 1986. He wanted the top personal rate left at 60, with relatively low thresholds. Now, if you're endorsing that, say so. If you're endorsing high marginal rates of tax at those rates, say so. But don't quote Senator Walsh attacking me for reducing the tax rates of Australians. Senator Walsh will attack anybody who reduces the tax rates of Australians because he's basically into a very highly nominally progressive tax scale. Not effectively progressive, nominally progressive. The fact that people don't pay it and didn't pay it always escaped him. Always escaped him. Now, the 60% rate, nobody paid it other than PAYE taxpayers. But we made the system more effectively progressive by removing the free lunches and the credit cards and the cars and by capital gains taxation and the fringe benefit tax. We made the system more effectively progressive, and I don't apologise to anybody for it. Don't apologise for anybody for it. I don't think that the social compact ought to apply with penal rates of tax, like we see in some of these countries which are often lauded by people like Sweden, with 80 and 90% marginal tax rates. Who'd want to live in a country where you take 80 or 90% a confiscatory tax regime? A confiscatory tax regime. What liberty is there left for people with that sort of tax policy? So we made the clear, distinct and philosophic point that the rate was 49, it was just under half, that the state didn't collect more than half. Senator Walsh always objected to that, and his objections were dismissed by the government, and he's still running that argument today. But in your silliness, you want to quote him. What do you want to do? Go back to, after all, John, they were your rates, pal, 60%. I had to bring them down. And here's your former advisor wanting to go back to them, quoting Senator Walsh about high marginal tax rates. And then he goes on. He goes on about the permissive wages policy through the 1980s. He quotes Senator Walsh on that. I remember distinctly having a conversation with Senator Walsh in 1989 when he was complaining about the tax cuts then. I said, OK, Peter, well, look, wages are going to take off at 12 to 15% in this quarter. What do you think we should do about it? He said, oh, I don't know, but we shouldn't pay the tax cuts. I said, yes, but that blows the whole inflation rate to pieces. Oh, well, that's the unions, they've got to pull their head in. I mean, the fact is it wouldn't happen. The market would have driven us to double-digit inflation. And those of us who had responsibility for policy had to make judgments about these things. And there's no point, Peter Walsh or anybody else, raking over old coals. The fact is we are sitting today with a 1.5% inflation rate. Game, set and match. Game, set and match. And the fact is, wages did hold in a recession, and calling a wage outcome in a boom, 6 to 7% permissive, when inflation was running at 7.5, in a boom, inflation running at 7.5% and wages running at 6 to 7 in a boom, that is travelling at the inflation rate or just below the inflation rate is permissive. I mean, what does Senator Walsh require of us? Further massive real wage cuts in a boom? I mean, really? And you want to go and quote it? You go, oh, there it is, productivity. I know, we saw your productivity rates about 0.8, 0.9 all the way through the 70s. We know how good you were.
The leader of the opposition.
Mr. Speaker, so I'm supposed to be blatantly dishonest for talking about, for not exposing this drift in policy, so-called, of wages policy through the 1980s. The accord's been a failure. we broke the dismal legacy of double-digit wages growth in a boom. For the first time ever, we've cut strikes by 60%, and you've still got the gall to say the Accord's a failure. We've got inflation at 1.5%, and you left us to flit off to the private sector with a 10.5% inflation rate. In 1983, we next found you in BRW with a column, but trying to be wise after the event. Now, Mr. Speaker, Senator Walsh says the tax cuts are a mistake. Well, that's a view. He's entitled to the view. But I don't believe in handing back the incidence of inflation on the tax system is a mistake. It's not a mistake. And it will not be tax cuts for a flat tax, because we're not going back to 60% marginal tax rates. And that's just simply that. Now, as far as Coronation Hill is concerned, I was asked a question on this by the leader of the National Party. And let me just make these points about it. The value of the gold production over the life of the Coronation Hill mine is only about $285 million. That is if you don't rehabilitate the mine. That's not profits. That is the value of the production. That is, the mine was estimated to have a net present. The mine was estimated to have a net present value of $82 million. $82 million. And if it has to be rehabilitated, as it would have to be, given its position on the South Alligator River, it would have to be rehabilitated. How much of that net present value of $82 million will be left upon that rehabilitation? Now, the fact is, Mr. Speaker, that this mine was a small mine. If you look at Marandoo is estimated to be worth $250 million a year in exports. Not overall, not $285 million over its life, but $250 million a year. And Newcrest Mining itself admitted that Coronation Hill mine was not big. It said this, Mr. John Quinn said in 13th of May 1991, "We have never suggested that Coronation Hill, on the basis of present knowledge, is other than a modest-scale mining operation." And he went on to say, "The proposed Coronation Hill gold mine, which in itself is not a large project, has become a totem issue for Australia." Well, it might have been a totem issue for the mining company, Newcrest. It may well have been. But the fact is, it is a small mine, as that executive officer of the company so describes it. Now, the fact is, Mr. Speaker, Senator Walsh has a bee in his bonnet about Coronation Hill, and he thinks the government should have overturned the decision. Well, that's fair enough. It's a view, and good on him for his view. But much of the criticism of subsequent government policy comes from the fact that the government seemingly hasn't taken his advice in relation to Coronation Hill. Now, I just heard the Leader of the Opposition interjecting I did deals on both sides. Look, I made my position clear about Coronation Hill in June 1991. That's how I would have voted when the matter came to Cabinet. I would have voted for an arrangement to be made between the Aboriginal community and the mining company to work it out. Cabinet, in its wisdom, decided otherwise. The Labor government decided otherwise. A decision was made, and as far as I'm concerned, the decision should stand. It's as simple as that. But to pick this up and come in today with this hodgepodge under the guise, again, of a censure motion. A censure. What has the government done to deserve a censure from you on this matter? References by a former minister or senator on issues of policy over the last couple of years and contemporary opinions deserves from you, apparently, a censure motion. That's an abuse of the standing orders. You don't understand what you're doing over there. That comes from your relative inexperience in the Parliament. You've never been around when issues of substance have been subject to censure motion, and you use it and you throw it around like confetti every day of the week. And one day, when you'll be like the boy who cried wolf. When you want to get up on a censure motion one day, we'll give it the contempt that most of these censures that you currently move deserve. Now, the fact is, Senator Walsh had a few things to say about you. And he said...
Leader of the Opposition.
He said about your GST, and it's also in the same article. He said the transition costs will be extremely high and there will be a big boost for the CPI, and therefore there will be a further prolonged and deep recession coming from that response. So the fact is, if you want to quote Senator Walsh, quote him on everything. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition has again gone over the top, has tried to find issues where issues don't exist, and has simply showed the fact that He is not up to it in the House of Representatives, not up to it in question time, and hides behind this device, and while doing so gets his backbenchers to take frivolous points of order to stop the government replying. So, Mr Speaker, I reject absolutely as rubbish this censure motion, as arrant nonsense.
Order.
And if you want to keep moving censures like that, we'll treat them with the contempt they deserve.
Honourable the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.